And we're live.
All right.
My computer has started crying already.
Mine's crying and it's not even the thing doing the streaming. All right. So this is our
Third
third
official
in
episode.
the month of May. And we talked about discussing tagging.
Mm.
Do we want to start with that, because I feel like it's worth mentioning, and we can send this link around to this video and get some people's feedback on it if we sort of just, show and describe what we're thinking of doing.
Well, it's an interesting one because the question of tagging came up because of something I noticed. I can't remember exactly which one I was on. Maybe I was on, I think it was the one that you showed me in the episode that we did together, where it was an old-ish Ember question, but then I saw this thing down the right-hand side, which was like related questions. Can you remind me how we got to those kind of old questions? It was like you searched
Oh
for
yeah,
Ember.js for
I
something?
searched for Ember in the top box. So you're putting tags around that, or
Jupyter,
you're putting
this one. Yeah,
square brackets.
that's like the tag syntax, I assume, then.
Yeah. So I just type Ember.
Just Ember, no .js or anything.
Right.
Search Q.
And then,
Ooh.
yeah, the things that come up are from 1,000 years ago in
There we go.
JavaScript time.
This one.
Yeah, 2013. And while some people have gone back and added more updated answers, some of these questions, to a certain extent, don't no longer they no longer deserve the same prominence, because the frame, like, not just Ember, it's not just Ember that's moved along, but I would say all JavaScript frameworks together have really grown and evolved. And some of the concepts that were once new, like, command line tools for building the app, and things like, you know, uh, components and whatnot, those aren't new concepts anymore.
And even JavaScript itself. Like, looking at this particular question, you can see it's using CoffeeScript, because back then, CoffeeScript gave us things that we needed in JavaScript, things that were interesting, things that were helpful, but now we've got a lot of those in ES6 and kind of later versions of, because of thanks to Babel and things like that. So we don't need CoffeeScript as much as we used to. And it's just it's an interesting artifact of these kind of older questions that a lot of them are in CoffeeScript.
I could also imagine, someone who's new searches for that, is what I would want as a learner from that list is more of like a frequently asked questions kind of rundown. And right now that's just not representative. So I think you had mentioned that one of the things that could be done would be to re-tag some of these things, so that older questions get tagged as, say, like really old ones get tagged as like Ember 1, or, I mean, I don't particularly care to tag things more specifically than 1 and older, but like quite a few of the top questions are even for pre 1.0, which is a different ballgame.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now it probably doesn't make too much sense to also tag things as Ember 2, but in a few months, in a year or so, things that there will be a difference between Ember 2 and Ember 3. But these ones are definitely...
The biggest, that when I think about, we say there's not a big difference in the sense that when Ember moves between major versions, it's about cleaning up deprecations and not about bringing in lots of new features. But the one thing that is quite different from the experience of a beginner is the import statements. So in 2.x, they're all import Ember from Ember, and then you call functions like Ember.computed. But if a new person copies and pastes those examples today, they're not going to work. And they may not understand why, and they may not have a way, it's a simple, to us, it's a simple conversion. Like if I look at an older code block and I see those imports, well, I know that I just need to look up in the API docs where that method is, and then I copy and paste the little import line from there. Like I know that because I've been doing this for a while, but new people might not. So I could even see some value in tagging them. At the same token, you don't want people to disregard good information that's been built up over multiple years just because of the import tag. So it's sort of a double-edged sword.
Well, it's kind of that sort of thing where my most successful answer on Stack Overflow was taking somebody else's already answer, the answer that they've already given, and kind of reformatting it in a slightly easier way so that you could kind of use it a little bit more sensibly or in more modern tools or something like that. So it seems to be okay in the kind of culture of Stack Overflow for somebody to maybe take the old style, as you're saying here, ember.application.create, and maybe just taking this and doing an answer as of, Ember 3. This is what it would look like nowadays. And that's a really good way if you're not really sure, if you're trying to get into answering questions. Like this is what I did. I was getting into answering questions and I happened upon a way to make somebody else's answer slightly easier. And then I got like 2,000 reputation from one answer,
Hey.
Just nuts. I'm not sure you'll get 2,000 reputation from an Ember answer because we're still
building momentum.
Yes, exactly.
So to speak.
So let's
speaking of building
action.
momentum.
Sorry,
I was gonna say just to talk about building momentum and reputation and whatnot. I've noticed a few other people have been going around upvoting things after I asked, and I really appreciate that because it's made a difference for me in terms of I have a couple more things that I can do now because I've finally hit the 500 mark.
Nice.
As well as it's just so much nicer to have it's like when you pass a friend in the hallway and you're like nod, you're like, hey. Like that is, if your friend totally ignores you every time that they walk by, then you're like, oh, I'm sad. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I have something to add to that part of the conversation in a second, but I just want to get your opinion on something. I know we raised this before, but sure. I've just added the Ember 1, and it's not a problem here because we've got, I think there's a maximum of 5 tags, but if we're going to ask people to look at this and kind of give us feedback, one thing I'd like to know is how do people feel about removing Ember.js as well as adding Ember 1?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe we could throw this idea out on the forum. I always want to say the wrong discourse.
Yeah,
discuss.
It's discuss.
The forum. It's the forum.
Ember.js.com.
The forum. I'm calling it the forum.
The forum. Boom, done.
Maybe let's throw it on the forum, and I'll link to it on Twitter, because I kind of want to gather some of that feedback before we really go through and start overhauling it, because we'll need other people to do it with us in order to be successful. And I like posting things like this. I like posting them on forum instead of Slack or directly on Twitter, because that way people can subscribe to the conversation and it's something that can be looked up and referenced later. We can come back to it and iterate, and it hasn't disappeared from the history, and it's not scattered, in some chain of comments. So what are your thoughts on that?
I like this, and I know you and I have been part of the conversation as to what sort of things should be posted in different places, and I'm very much in favor of what you're saying about things that can be longer term conversations. Like maybe somebody wants to weigh in a month because maybe they have a different opinion on it, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
they've got experience on it. If that's
Yeah.
a conversation that we have on the Slack, then I don't know. I don't even know if our Slack messages last the week. You know,
And even if they did last longer, it's not a super great format for
yeah,
long-lived
it's
conversation
not
anyway.
designed for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So maybe uh
Okay.
we can take a little bit of time later and sort of write that up and
So
get
I'll
some.
add the Ember
Yeah,
one.
I would say go ahead and do it now.
Well, I'll
It's
add the
really
Ember
the
one.
question is removal is a
Yeah, so I've added the Ember one, and I'm going to send you this link in Slack just so that we don't lose it, so that when we're writing up the thing on the forum,
sure.
we have that link. And the question is essentially, should we remove Ember.js from that question?
Yep.
Okay, so that's that. The thing that I wanted to talk to you about when it came to upvoting and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw this question that I answered throughout the week. Essentially, we had this question that was tagged as Ember because it's an Ember data question, and it's an
Yep.
interesting, complicated question with a little bit of like you have to have a deep understanding. Well, not even a deep understanding. You have to kind of make sure that your concepts are correct when approaching it, because
Mm-hmm.
even in the question, what was this person's name? Their name was Cass. Even in the question, they've gone as far as writing a serializer. And this is quite, this is pro level stuff. Serializers are hard to write. And they got it working, but it was just almost right, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And the I came to this question and I had like -5. I think you can push a button. Yeah, -5 votes because they started the question with, "I have a job interview."
Yes, this one.
Yeah, and then everybody was like commenting on, "Oh, if it's a job interview, do it yourself," kind of thing. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And I used my edit powers, which it looks like they've edited it again. I'll have a look and see what's changed. But I edited it and removed that line that said for a job interview, and then it's just exactly the same as any other question. So now we've got this really good question that's got a total of -2 when you come to it, and people are going to go, "Oh, that's a terrible question because it's got a vote of
Mm-hmm.
-2." And then the question is, what do we do with this? How do I share this with people? I didn't want to just throw it into the announcements channel in Slack to say, "Hey, everybody, vote this up," because that's a bit much. Even the the team learning channels, that's like 700 people, and it's like, is that the right place for this?
Yeah.
Or do I just reach out to people directly and say, "Look, can you upvote this for me?" Or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think in the past the dev issue triage channel has been used for some Stack Overflow things.
Dev issue
Um,
triage. I didn't know this was a thing.
yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. Um, the it's also been used for like if somebody makes an issue on GitHub to kind of raise its profile a little bit because it's really easy to sort of drown in piles of issues when you're an open source maintainer. And one of the most valuable things somebody can do is ping you to say, like, hey, really, this one needs more immediate attention or
Mm-hmm.
is like immediately solvable or ready to be merged or, something like that. Um, and so I think they've gone there in the past. Uh, there are a couple people who have said that they're willing to kind of jump in and do things like make edits or vote to close and such. And I can dig up that list and send it to you. When I did my Stack Overflow project this past fall, there was a list that I sort of had a private chat going that I sent some things over. So I think one of the things that I was kind of hoping to get out of this project is having a better sense of where those types of requests should go, and whether we need some place where that can be posted. Um,
Yeah, because it's
that's
everything.
something that could even be like as well a forum post. It doesn't necessarily need to be its own channel, because the tough thing is alert fatigue. If it's just like a stream of alerts about things that are going on, it can actually make people stop paying attention over time.
Yeah,
Whereas, coming back to the discussion forum, that's something I could check every few days. And
it's one of those things where we're maybe in a bit of a limbo where maybe I don't want to put this on something so permanent as saying, here is a list of things that I want people to upvote, and I don't want that to be part of the public record. So maybe it's kind of leaning towards Slack. But then you were saying about this dev issue triage. If we're becoming more more kind of active in the Stack Overflow community, then I don't want us to take over the dev issue triage and
yeah,
then for
yeah.
us to be then annoying a lot of people.
I
So
think there's a way, though, for the discussion forums, the way that I would put something like this publicly um, would be to say, I don't have exactly the words off the top of my head right now, but not like, oh, can we upvote this? And more say, hey, I think, you know, um, I'm wondering what everyone thinks about being more supportive of questions like this. I feel kind of bad about the downvote. So it's not like everyone upvote this. I've made a decision, but it's more like that would be my reaction when I open this up myself, would be like, oh, this poor person who's just learning Ember
yeah,
has uh has not been met with the kindest response, possibly from their perspective. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that, whether how much help someone should get when it's for a job interview, I can understand some people's reaction that, like, the point is to kind of learn it yourself a little bit, but that doesn't preclude um, giving some answer.
yeah,
So it's sort of like when your friend wants help uh, writing an essay that's important for a grade or something like that. Maybe you don't give them all the answers. Maybe you don't give them every last bit of proofreading, because to a certain extent they're supposed to do the work themselves.
yeah.
But you can still suggest this paragraph is unclear, or here's a resource that might really help you out while you're learning. Like, good luck with your interview. Um, so not handing them the answers, but also not just saying like, oh, go do it yourself.
The
There's a middle ground,
well,
is what
the,
I'm
the
saying.
the thing
There's many
here is
words.
that this one was definitely not in any gray area. The actual
Yeah.
error was that they had in the API, it had item singular here, and then
Oh, yeah.
items plural there. And then there was a
Good
few other things that just
spot.
weren't fully hooked up, but that was the main issue. It was just
Yeah.
singular plural, and that gets
Oh,
us so
they
many
were
times.
so close.
Yeah, I know, and that's what I
Yeah,
was saying. It's like
I've
such.
made that mistake in Mirage
Oh, I've made that mistake so many
repeatedly.
times, so many times. It's like one of the first things that I'd reach for. It's like, oh, did I get my pluralization right? Because I've made it so many times. Oh god.
Same here.
Well, we'll
Hmm.
we'll kind of reach. Do you know what? It's probably worth us if we're writing a post on the discussion forum about what do we think about uh, de-tagging old things. We can make this more of a how do we want to approach Stack Overflow post and ask where do we want to form the community around, like, what do we think about answering this? Upvotes and
Yeah.
downvotes and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I like that as well, because I'd like to write that wrap up post
oh
at the
yes,
end
of
of this
course, the
month,
wrap up post. Yeah.
and including other people's ideas, and that would actually be really helpful.
Oh, that's even more interesting. So we get the the forum post out soonish,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then we include that forum post answers in the wrap up post. Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes. 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 Because ultimately, you know, um, my participation as an individual doesn't move the needle as much as uh, getting other people engaged and sort of coming to some more community-based ideas.
What's the whole idea of
So
being a
that other
force
people do it.
multiplier, isn't it? You need
Yep,
to make other people be really successful, and then we're all successful.
exactly, exactly.
So
Uh,
uh, I don't know where we want to go next on this, or if we want to go into an actual question. But there was something else
um,
that I noticed when I was looking at this CAS issue.
yeah.
So I can't remember who it was. There was somebody brought up some point about like it's okay. Oh, it was on one of the YouTube videos. Did you see the comments on the YouTube videos?
No, I didn't.
Somebody,
We have
some
comments.
yeah, we've got comments. I know it's great, and I had
Okay, no, they're good.
no, it's
For
good. It's
YouTube
good.
comments, Chris.
But it was essentially saying it was something along the lines of telling us to get a bunch of people to upvote things
Yeah.
to make them more prominent or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm a little bit frightened about chain voting because I don't want to vote for things and then them be taken back. So
Yes, because it does do that. If you upvote serial upvoting,
yeah,
it'll any points or upvotes or whatever you've done for somebody else, if it thinks you're just spamming upvotes,
but
uh,
it's interesting because
revert it.
the commenter linked to some discussion in the Stack Overflow meta. It was a little bit hard for me to understand, but it was laying out the rules of that. And
Hmm.
essentially, it seems to be that there is nothing wrong with serially upvoting Ember things, but there are things wrong with serially upvoting things for Cass, the questioner, the person here. So what
Okay.
I did, because of the fact that I saw these questions, related questions on the right hand side, which by the way, some of those don't have any answers, they might be ones to look at. I clicked on Cass and then I looked at their uh, their uh, activity and then went through and started like voting for things, either answers to Cass's questions or questions that Cass is even answering questions for Ember as well. So it's like this whole,
Oh, nice.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
And I started,
If they just learned this from, a course that they studied on their own and now they're jumping in and helping other people out, that's pretty amazing.
and even at like such, like, I'm not trying to be judgmental here, but when you have little reputation, I had a conversation with somebody on a GitHub issue uh, today about, if you're a beginner in a technology, it's quite useful to use your beginner mindset to help other beginners.
Oh yeah.
Instead of somebody like us who've been using Ember for years, sometimes we forget what it's like to literally never do anything with a component or something like that. So somebody
Hmm.
who's just learned how to do components can answer a lot of component questions on Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
But what else? Oh, the thing that I wanted to share, and this is why I'm going down this tangent, is instead of thinking of votes as I approve of this, I've started thinking of it more as like contributing to the economy of Ember questions on Stack Overflow.
Ooh,
Because I have
that is
20
true.
votes or something a day that I can use, well, it would be good if those 20 votes was in the Ember economy of Stack Overflow.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great way to think about it. As well as particularly for the new people. I mean, I don't f- I've I don't feel this pain anymore, but when I first started trying to do Stack Overflow things, the first like 50 or so points that you have to get, it's 50 or it's 100, I forget
Mm.
what, to just put a comment or link to something. I couldn't link to things. And
Ooh.
if I was a new person with lots of energy and with this, very valuable sort of fresh mindset that I could use to help other people, the platform holds you back a little bit, unless other people jump in and upvote your stuff. So I got like basically just had to keep answering questions while posting like less links or maybe no links or something, and not being able to ask clarifying questions until enough people accepted my answers because no one was upvoting things that I could actually do some of the basic functionality of the site. And so that is a huge help. I really like thinking of it that way.
I've also been listening to way too many economics podcasts recently.
Funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think I've done with my tangents. If we want to get into actual question answering.
Which one do you want to do?
So we have a few ones that are kind of hanging around from before. I won't spend too much time on this because what we said 2 weeks ago or however long it was, we'll just kind of frame the answer and then maybe we can answer it offline. This was the one that we edited and reopened, which was successfully reopened, which is awesome.
Yes.
This is the one where they're using Cake PHP and they're saying this thing about the server side. On the server side, null is not capturable. And your comment on this is pretty much as close to the answer that I wanted to kind of give to this, which was you don't have to do everything in Ember Data. If you really need to step outside Ember Data, you can, and you can just do a post. But my question and the thing I want to bring up here is, if you do that, we kind of have a lot of side effects because you have to maybe refresh the model after you change something that would affect that model. And I'm like, how deep into those woods do you think we should go for the answer?
When creating a relationship, the client transmits the ID. Oh, I see. And so if you send, if you send a delete or whatever outside of Ember data, you're gonna have to handle pushing things to the store.
Yeah, so what I was thinking,
from the store.
The simple way to do that would be to handle the delete the relationship thing. But then if you just did a get model by ID or whatever the thing is, find record, I can never remember which one, I always have to look it up. If you just do a find record on the ID of the object that you just edited, that updates the store, doesn't it?
Because it'll come back with a not found and then remove it from the store.
So let's see if they give an example here. So the example that I was expecting, let me go into a situation here. The example that I was expecting was that we would have like a whatever it was, let's say house model, and that's going to be like some sort of Ember data model, and then it would have owner, which is again an Ember data model in this case, and then essentially there's a relationship between person, let's call this Bob.
Can you increase the text size also? Thank you.
Oh wow, that
Much
took
better.
a long time to actually do anything. Come on. So Bob is a person, and then house.owner equals Bob. You know, let's imagine that that's kind of set up properly in Ember data stuff. Now, if you did a post to whatever it is going to be, house owner delete, and then the ID here is like whatever 5, which would delete the owner of the house. I'm assuming that if you did like a this.store.find record house 5, it would update the in-memory version of the house so that house.owner no longer points at Bob?
So find record will hit the store cache first.
Oh.
So query record will, or query by ID or whatever it's called,
This query by
will
ID.
not hit the store first. The query always makes an API request.
So that's interesting. So essentially what we'd need here is like a way to force that to refresh it from the server. If you do a query, does that update the store cache internally as well?
Yeah.
So
that should work, because if you think about a larger application where it's not just an individual user's data, you would want that app to keep updating, in real time. If you've used query, you would want the store to sort of respond to a record no longer being there.
and then if there's a reference to that record or whatever is somewhere else, it should automatically update if it's in like a template or something.
I think so. These are the kinds of things where I think to myself that I need to put together like a little Firebase. Well, Firebase is not going to do my JSON API stuff, most likely, but some sort of, I feel sometimes that I need a backend full of dummy data that I can just run this against, because this is a case where it could use Mirage, sort of some of the more advanced Mirage features, but sometimes I really want to see what happens if something strange is coming back in a request, or a case like this where I want to delete something.
Well, yeah, so this is how I solved Kaz's question. Like, they had this weird stuff, like they were, I don't know if you saw any of these comments or whatever, but it was like, oh, I asked a question, oh, it's quite hard to kind of do it if I don't have an example. And then they were saying, I can't remember where it was. Oh, you can't see all of the comments because some of them are not. Yeah. They were like, no problem, I can add the API key. And I was like, no, don't add the API key to the question. And it was like, they did, and I edited it out and all this sort of stuff. And it was like, oh, God, just don't do that. But I answered the question by spinning up my quick autoroute backend thing and just have it spit back out these exact JSONs. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it is really useful to do that sort of a thing.
Okay.
So is this the one you were talking about? Query record?
Query and query record. And somewhere in there, it says something. Does it not explicitly say?
Well, because a query record makes it use query parameters. I was wondering about like forcing a find record.
Let me look at the API docs real quick, because there was one place.
Oh, look, there it says. It says explicitly, this method makes a request for one record when the ID is not known beforehand. If the ID is known, use find record. So maybe there's a way to tell find record to like force update. I'm sure there'll be something somewhere. Store.
Let me see.
This is what I want. Index.
Ember API docs.
Options.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Data. The store. What did you find? I'm not looking at the screencast.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to reload that model.
Yep.
So there's a thing you can just set as the third option. So you've got the type, the ID, and then the third option is a set of options. The third parameter is options.
Oh, you can pass it a reload.
Reload true.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, that's good. All right, so that's one way to do it. I think it's worth describing both scenarios a little bit because when I think about like this particular person, probably like if I was in their shoes, personally, I would keep doing what they're doing, which is I would send the additional information that my, non-JSON API or my not 100% JSON API compliant backend needs, so that I can keep just going with the flow of JSON API. Like that's what I would do. But I also think that in the future, when people land on this question, it may not be so cut and dry.
Yeah.
Um,
I probably, if I do end up answering this one, I'd probably start it with the number one recommendation is make your backend compliant. And
yeah,
then,
yes.
because what it would be one of those things, what I'm about to tell you might probably work, but there are probably issues that I haven't thought about that are going to bite you.
And it's much easier to get, sometimes, I should say, sometimes it's much easier if you have control over what your API is returning. It's often easier to make changes there. Um, so,
Sometimes you don't have control over
but
that as well.
sometimes you don't have control, and sometimes there would be lots of downstream effects. So, depends on the architecture. But
Tricky
okay, yeah,
problem.
I think that's good, and I learned a thing which is find record, reload true. So.
Right, okay, so that's my question about questions answered. Did you have a specific question that you wanted to tackle?
So I was looking at I would actually, so it's getting close to 9 o'clock
Oh, yes,
already,
of course.
actually. And I do have to head off to work in a little bit, but I want your opinion on the right click and left click options one, which is um if you search Ember and you go to
Ember.
newest. That's weird. Why does it show up as 3 hours ago still?
So I go into newest, right click and left click options.
Oh, I see. This person maybe closed. There's a different write-up of this. I think they closed it and reopened it. So they must have gotten some progress. So let me reread it actually. Okay. Wherever you click on the corresponding. So the thing that, so I have a couple, I actually would kind of just like to know what your problem solving approach to this would be, because I think you could use the events. Basically, when you're doing, for some context for anyone who's listening, when you're handling DOM events, you can do it by tying an action to a particular element, but there's also a thing where, or you can use closure actions where you say like on click equals, and then you set your action to it. But then there's also the thing where on a component, you can actually catch the events outside of the actions hash. So there's things like, I think it's like on click or on key press or whatever. If you put functions with those names, they will receive the events for those components. And so I think
that one is
if
what
you
you're talking
did
about.
the click, yeah, I think that's what they're doing here. They've got this click event. I think the event should capture whether it was a right or left click.
Yeah, so my
So I kind of want to know if I'm barking up the right tree here.
the
But also there's some other things going on here that just I wasn't sure where to start.
well, yeah. So a lot of the times when these things happen, it's always like there's an initial problem that's kind of occluding the secondary problems, and this right left click thing is probably that initial problem.
Yeah, that's
My
true.
my thought, my was it problem-solving approach to this is danger, danger, because I never get any of these click things right. Every single time something with events comes up, I go back and I watch deep diving into events, which we now have Ember videos YouTube. We now have the one from EmberConf this year. I know it was originally in Ember Fest uploads. Where is it? Deep dive into events. Did you see this one?
Yeah. Well,
There it is.
are you talking about the Marie Chatfield's one?
Yes,
Yes,
Marie
I did. I
Chatfield.
did see that one. That was so good. I've seen that video. I've seen clips of the other one, and I read the blog post, and it really unlocked my understanding of some problems that I had been having with the nav bar on one of the Ember sites, where like
Ah.
I was clicking on the in mobile. I had to abandon this pull request. I couldn't figure it out back in the day. I was clicking on the hamburger menu, and then I was clicking on the search bar inside of that hamburger menu, and no matter what I was doing, clicking inside the search kept collapsing the hamburger menu, and I could not
Oh God.
understand what was going on. And I must have spent like an hour and a half on it, and then I just never. I came back to it a second time. I was thinking maybe I'm doing something silly, um, and I couldn't solve it the second time either. And this talk explained why and how. So like anytime you've got those DOM events, they need to happen in a certain order, or they're nested, or they're like different under certain conditions or whatever. This is like the best.
Like I use this video as reference material,
Okay.
and it's
Uh-huh.
just like I don't know if I told you about this before, but sometimes I watch things in multiple speed.
Oh yeah, I do too.
So it's like
You didn't tell me, but I do the same thing.
yeah, so it's like I kind of scrub through the video to watch it real quick to remember the bits that Marie was talking about because it is so useful. Uh, and
Mm.
the reason why I kind of if it jumped out is because I remember Marie talking about if you need to do things with the DOM event API, and that's
Yep.
what you were saying about knowing if it was a right click or a left click, then it needs to be
Mm-hmm.
on the DOM side of that graph that she was showing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, we're now in the DOM side, and it will work with Ember, but it's like just make sure you know that there's these caveats, these problems that might arise, um, before kind of progressing. And that's where I would kind of start here. Is just kind of look at that, look at this again, and then think of the DOM API and look it up on MDN or something like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's probably where I would get stuck because I haven't read the full thing. Or if it's gone. This one? No.
Yeah, there's also something you have to do to allow right clicks to come through or something like that. But just like in browsers, are the browsers always going to grab? Hmm.
Yeah, I think it was something about how you define the event or something. Can't really remember.
Yeah, because there's a
Although I'm
um
looking at this, it looks like they're doing a bit of jQuery like madness. And I actually this was a little bit of a it was a bit of a telltale sign when they were saying what was it the corresponding inspect HTML file shows here. So it's like if they're looking directly at the HTML and then
Yep.
doing jQuery
Yep.
to do things.
So that's why I was like, where would you start? Because there's actually multiple layers of things going on here, but um I think you're right that like the first layer problem is getting the right click
Hmm.
to be captured in a normal Ember way. and then kind of coaching through those function bindings and whatnot. Although I will say that when I see code like this, what I think to myself is I wonder if they're using some NPM package that is sort of like a black box to Ember things. Or a black box to non-Ember things. I mean, if you dropped it in a more like in a non-framework app, you'd have the same problem. But like sometimes, I found myself doing that kind of manipulation if I'm dealing with some UI elements that I've pulled in from an external library. So I think I'll mention that as well. That like if these table rows and things are actually under your control, basically, here's the better way to do it, because sometimes they're not. All right, I'm gonna run because I have to go get ready for work and head out the door.
Awesome.
So we didn't answer any questions, but I'm gonna come. You answered some of my questions, so
we did say that we weren't going to be answering the questions on the stream anyway. So now that we've talked about how I should tackle this one, then I can tackle this one, and maybe you can tackle this one here.
Try the click one. Yeah, I really badly want to know how to do the right click as well in general in Ember. So I'm gonna do some
and maybe
research.
Write a post about it afterwards.
Hey, that's what I like to do. So I've got more posts queued up than like I think I have days left in the year. Like in my head. I don't have an actual list of them, but like if I was made to sit down and list them all off, it would be an impossible task to finish them, but we'll see. Something from this past week is going to turn into a blog post. At the very least, it'll be the debugging one. Chris, I might pay you for help. So I asked on Twitter, I said, hey, community vote, what should my next blog post topic be? And Chris Westra said, make it on debugging. And I was like, oh boy, because my debugging approaches are rudimentary. They work, but they're not. I know that there is a lot of room for improvement. And so at first I was like, oh, that's like going to be the worst blog topic. How I don't know if I have anything to add of value here. And then I came to my senses and thought, like, actually, sometimes topics like that make for a good blog post, because in order to write the blog post, I have to explore and research a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I have to learn a thing that I should probably know anyway. So
back to our comment about the beginner's mindset as well. It's like the perfect time to write the post about it.
For sure. So maybe this one will be a candidate as well. I have to make sure I don't procrastinate too much.
Overcommit on all of the things that you like to write posts about.
All right. I will catch you later, Chris. Thank you very much, and have a great week.
Yeah, you too. See you later.
Bye.